The radio crackled with static, then silence. Captain Reyes pressed his back against the crumbling concrete wall, dust cascading from the building's skeletal remains as another mortar round exploded 50 meters away. His platoon was pinned down in what used to be a marketplace in Kandahar province, now reduced to rubble and death. The Taliban had them surrounded, and their extraction window was closing fast. "Phoenix Base, this is Alpha 7 Actual," Reyes whispered into his radio, throat dry as sand. "We need immediate air support. Grid coordinates follow." He rattled off numbers that might as well have been his squad's obituary. 23 soldiers. Good soldiers. Kids, most of them, who'd never see their families again if help didn't come. The response from Phoenix Base hit like a sledgehammer. Alpha 7 Actual, negative on air support. All aircraft recalled due to weather conditions. Recommend immediate withdrawal to alternate LZ. Ray stared at the radio as if it had spoken in a foreign language. Withdrawal? To where? They were completely surrounded, taking fire from 3 directions, with wounded who couldn't be moved. The weather conditions were a dust storm that had rolled in 20 minutes ago, turning the world into a brown nightmare where visibility dropped to mere feet. "Sir," Sergeant Martinez crawled up beside him, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage on his shoulder. "Rodriguez isn't going to make it without a medevac. Neither is Thompson." Through the swirling dust, Reyes could see the outline of enemy fighters moving closer, their AK-47s chattering like deadly insects. His radio operator, PFC Williams, was trying to raise anyone who might have aircraft available. The kid's voice was getting higher with each failed transmission. Then, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk, came a sound that didn't belong. Low, mechanical, getting closer. It wasn't the whine of helicopter rotors or the scream of an F-16. This was different, deeper, like some ancient god of war clearing its throat. "Phoenix Base, this is Razor 6-1. The voice that came over the radio was calm, almost conversational, with just the hint of a southern drawl. "I copy Alpha 7 in contact. Stand by for close air support." Razor 6-1, Phoenix Base. "You are not authorized for this mission. Weather conditions are below minimums. RTB immediately." "Phoenix Base, Razor 6-1. With respect, I didn't copy that last transmission. Experiencing radio difficulties." Captain Reyes pressed harder against the wall as another burst of automatic weapons fire-chewed chunks from the concrete inches from his head. That sound, that growling mechanical thunder, was getting closer. The radio sparked again. "Alpha 7 Actual, this is Razor 6-1. Pop smoke and stay down, the cavalry's coming." Through the brown hell of swirling dust, something dark and angular began to take shape, flying impossibly low. Too low. As if the pilot was navigating by instinct and prayer, threading the needle through zero visibility at treetop level. The distinctive silhouette of an A-10 Thunderbolt emerged from the storm like a prehistoric predator returning from extinction. Nobody at Phoenix Base had authorized this mission. Nobody was supposed to be flying in these conditions, but somebody was about to save their lives. The A-10 banked hard left, its titanium bathtub cockpit catching what little light penetrated the dust storm. Through the chaos, Reyes caught a glimpse of the pilot's helmet in the cockpit, smaller than he'd expected. The aircraft's GAU-8 Avenger cannon, that 7-barrel instrument of divine retribution, was already swiveling toward the enemy positions. "Razor 6-1, this is Alpha 7 Actual. We have wounded danger close on all sides. Can you make the run?" "Alpha 7, I can see your smoke. Keep your heads down, this might get loud." The A-10 disappeared back into the dust, engines growling like a hunting cat. For a moment, there was only the sound of incoming fire and Williams whimpering into his radio. Then the world exploded. The GAU-8 opened up with a sound like God's own zipper being pulled, a prolonged BRRRRRRRRRT that made the ground shake. 30mm depleted uranium rounds chewed through enemy positions with surgical precision, turning fortified Taliban firing positions into smoking craters. The aircraft pulled up, banked, and came around for another pass before the echo of the first run had faded. "Holy shit," Martinez whispered, staring through the dust at what remained of the enemy position to their north. "Who the hell is flying that thing?" The radio crackled. "Alpha 7, Razor 6-1, how's that looking?" Ray's keyed his mic with hands that were suddenly steadier. "Razor 6-1, beautiful work. Enemy position neutralized, but we've got more contact southeast side." "Copy, making my approach now." Through gaps in the dust storm, they could see muzzle flashes from a building 200 meters away. The A-10 came in from the west, so low it seemed impossible, the pilot flying by feel through visibility that was essentially zero. This time, the GAU-8's burst was shorter, more precise. The building simply ceased to exist, replaced by a cloud of debris and silence. "Jesus," Williams muttered. "That pilot's either crazy or the best damn stick I've ever seen." The A-10 made 3 more passes, systematically eliminating every enemy position that dared to fire on Alpha 7. With each run, the aircraft seemed to dance through the storm, appearing and disappearing like a ghost made of titanium and fury. The pilot's voice remained calm throughout, almost conversational, as if conducting a training exercise rather than performing impossible flying through a combat zone in zero visibility. "Alpha 7, this is Razor 6-1. I count no more muzzle flashes. How are your wounded?" "Still critical, Razor 6-1. We need medevac." "Copy. I've got Phoenix Base on guard frequency. Dust Hawk inbound your position in 15 minutes. As the dust began to settle, Rays caught another glimpse of the A-10 as it pulled up and away. The aircraft was scarred with bullet holes, hydraulic fluid streaming from somewhere near the left engine. Whoever was flying that thing had taken damage and kept fighting. 20 minutes later, as the medevac helicopter lifted off with Rodriguez and Thompson stabilized aboard, Rays tried to raise Razor 6-1 on the radio. Static. He tried Phoenix Base instead. "Phoenix Base, Alpha 7 actual. Request to thank Razor 6-1 for save. Can you patch me through?" Long pause. "Alpha 7, Phoenix Base. No call sign Razor 6-1 on today's flight schedule. All A-10 sorties were scrubbed due to weather." Ray stared at his radio. "Phoenix Base, say again." "Alpha 7, there are no A-10s airborne today. Repeat, no Warthogs in your sector." "That's impossible. We had close air support from." "Alpha 7, stand by." Another pause. "Alpha 7, Phoenix Base. We show Razor 6-1 RTB approximately 30 minutes ago. Aircraft took battle damage, emergency landing at forward operating base shank. Pilot is..." "Let me check." "Captain Valencia Rodriguez-Chen. She's being debriefed by command." The name hit Rays like a physical blow. Rodriguez-Chen. He'd heard that name before, whispered in hangars and repeated in mess halls with a mixture of awe and something else. Something that sounded like fear. Captain Martinez crawled over, his shoulder properly bandaged now. "Sir, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have, Sergeant, maybe I have." The radio crackled one more time. "Alpha 7, Phoenix Base. For the record, Captain Rodriguez-Chen was explicitly ordered not to fly today. Weather conditions were deemed too dangerous for close air support missions. She disobeyed direct orders to respond to your situation." Rays looked around at his platoon, 23 soldiers who were still alive, because someone had decided their lives were worth more than following orders. 23 families who would see their sons and daughters again, because a pilot named Valencia Rodriguez-Chen had flown through hell itself to bring them home. "Phoenix Base, Alpha 7 actual. Tell Captain Rodriguez-Chen that Alpha 7 sends their deepest gratitude." "I'll pass that along, Alpha 7, but you should know this isn't the first time." As they waited for transport back to base, Rays found himself staring at the sky, now clear of dust, wondering about the pilot who'd saved them. Valencia Rodriguez Chen. The name seemed to carry weight, like a stone dropped in still water, sending ripples in all directions. He didn't know it yet, but he just encountered a legend in the making. Someone the Taliban had learned to fear, the grunts had learned to worship, and command had learned to simultaneously discipline and depend on. Someone who flew like she had a personal grudge against gravity and a love affair with impossible odds. Someone they called Valkyrie. 3 months earlier, the officers' club at Bagram Airfield had been filled with the usual mix of pilots, navigators, and support personnel, all trying to decompress after another day of war. The conversation was loud, fueled by near beer and the kind of gallows humor that kept people sane in an insane place. Captain Rodriguez Chen sat at the bar's far end, nursing a Coke and reading a technical manual on A-10 hydraulic systems. She'd been in-country for 6 weeks, and the other pilots still hadn't quite figured her out. She was quiet when they expected bravado, studious when they expected partying, and completely unimpressed by the usual fighter-jock peacocking. "Hey, Rodriguez Chen," called out Major Davidson, an F-16 pilot with too many confirmed kills and too much ego. "You planning to actually fly combat missions or just read about them?" She looked up from her manual, dark eyes steady. "I fly when I'm needed, sir." "Needed?" Davidson laughed, loud enough for half the club to hear. "Sweetie, this is Afghanistan, not some training exercise back in Arizona. When the shit hits the fan, you need pilots with balls, not textbooks." The club had gone quieter, the way it always did when someone crossed a line. Rodriguez Chen closed her manual and turned on her stool to face Davidson fully. She was smaller than most of the pilots, barely clearing the minimum height requirements, but something in her posture made her seem larger. "Sir, with respect, when soldiers are dying on the ground, they don't care if their air support has balls. They care if it shows up." Davidson's smile turned ugly. Big words from someone who hasn't even been outside the wire yet. "Actually, sir, I flew my first combat mission yesterday. Grid 41 RQQ 12,345 67,890. Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 87th Infantry. They were taking heavy fire from a fortified position in a village compound." The room was dead silent now. Davidson's face had changed, recognition flickering in his eyes. "I put 30mm rounds through a 12-inch window from 800 meters, Rodriguez Chen continued, her voice steady as stone. "Neutralized the threat without hitting the civilian structure next door or the school behind it. Alpha Company completed their mission with 0 KIA. Davidson stared at her. He'd been the flight lead yesterday, had seen the gun camera footage from that mission. The precision required for that shot, threading depleted uranium rounds through a window barely larger than a dinner plate, in a crosswind with friendly's danger clothes, was the kind of flying that normally took years to develop. "Lucky shot," he muttered, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. Rodriguez Chen smiled, the expression as sharp as a blade. "Sir, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I've been preparing my whole life." She finished her Coke, left money on the bar, and walked out. The room stayed quiet for a long moment before conversation gradually resumed. But something had changed. Word of that conversation, and more importantly, word of that shot, began to spread through the base like wildfire. Valencia Rodriguez Chen had grown up in East Los Angeles, the daughter of a Salvadoran mother and a Taiwanese father who'd met while both were serving in the Navy. Her earliest memories were of her father's stories about flying, about the freedom found in 3 dimensions, about the responsibility that came with controlling something as powerful as a military aircraft. Her mother told different stories, about duty, about sacrifice, about the weight of decisions made in split seconds that affected entire families, about how strength wasn't measured in muscle mass or voice volume, but in the willingness to do what needed to be done when others couldn't or wouldn't. Valencia had inherited her father's spatial intelligence and her mother's unshakable moral compass. She'd also inherited something else, a gift for seeing patterns, for processing complex three-dimensional problems faster than most people could understand them. It made her a natural pilot and a natural target for those who couldn't accept that talent came in packages they didn't expect. At the Air Force Academy, she'd faced instructors who questioned whether she had the killer instinct needed for combat flying. During pilot training, she'd endured suggestions that maybe she'd be better suited for transport or reconnaissance. Throughout her career, there had always been someone ready to explain why she didn't quite fit their idea of what a warrior looked like. She'd answered each doubt the same way, by being better prepared, more precise, and more reliable than anyone expected. She studied systems until she could troubleshoot problems in her sleep. She practiced maneuvers until they became muscle memory. She learned to fly not just her assigned aircraft, but every aircraft she might need to understand to keep ground troops alive. By the time she reached Afghanistan, Valencia Rodriguez-Chen had become something rare in military aviation, a pilot who could make an A-10 Thunderbolt dance like a ballet dancer and hit like a heavyweight boxer, all while maintaining the calm professionalism of someone discussing the weather. But professionalism and precision weren't enough to earn respect from everyone. Some people needed to see blood before they believed in ghosts. The mission that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning when the weather was supposed to be perfect. Intel had identified a high-value target, a Taliban commander responsible for a series of IED attacks that had killed 6 American soldiers and countless Afghan civilians. The compound was isolated, the winds were calm, and the visibility was unlimited. It should have been routine. Rodriguez-Chen was flying as wingman to Captain Torres, an experienced pilot everyone liked and respected. The plan was simple. Torres would make the first pass with precision-guided munitions. Rodriguez-Chen would provide overwatch and handle any secondary targets. They found the compound exactly where intelligence had said it would be, a collection of mud-brick buildings surrounded by walls and populated with men carrying AK-47s. Torres made his approach from the south, altitude perfect, airspeed optimal. The missile that hit his aircraft came from nowhere, a shoulder-fired SAM that Intel had insisted wasn't in the area. Torres' A-10 shuddered, rolled left, and began smoking from the right engine. "Mayday, mayday, this is Hammer 2-1. Torres' voice was tight with pain and concentration. "I'm hit, engine fire, losing hydraulics." Rodriguez-Chen banked hard to follow him, her mind already calculating distances, altitudes, and possibilities. "Hammer 2-1, this is Hammer 2-2. I've got you in sight. Status report." "Controls are sluggish, fire warning lights. I'm leaking fluid all over the place. I don't think I can make it back to base." Below them, the Taliban compound was coming alive. More SAMs were being uncovered, RPGs were being positioned, and every gun in the place was turning skyward. Intel had been wrong about more than just the missiles. This wasn't a simple leadership target. This was a heavily fortified anti-aircraft position designed to down exactly the kind of aircraft they were flying. "Hammer 2-1, recommend immediate withdrawal," Rodriguez-Chen said into her radio. "This is a trap." "Negative 2-2. Mission is still active. HVT is still in that compound." Rodriguez-Chen watched Torres' aircraft struggling to maintain altitude, hydraulic fluid streaming like blood from multiple wounds. She could see the fire spreading from the engine compartment, could calculate exactly how long he had before catastrophic failure. "Hammer 2-1, you need to eject, now." 2-2, I can still fly, making my attack run." What happened next would be debated in ready rooms and training classrooms for years afterward. Torres, wounded and flying a dying aircraft, began his attack on the compound. Rodriguez-Chen, against every regulation and tactical doctrine in the book, followed him in. But where Torres was flying wounded and predictable, Rodriguez-Chen flew like liquid lightning. She came in from the west while every gun was tracking tours to the south. Her GAU-8 cannon opened up not on the buildings, but on the anti-aircraft positions themselves, walking 30mm rounds across SAM sights and machine gun nests with surgical precision. Torres got his shot off, 2 Maverick missiles that turned the main building into rubble, but the effort cost him. His aircraft, pushed beyond its limits, began to come apart. He ejected at 300 feet, his parachute barely having time to deploy before he hit the ground. Rodriguez-Chen circled the compound like an avenging angel, her cannon systematically destroying every threat she could identify. When Taliban fighters tried to move toward Tor's landing position, she put rounds so close they could feel the heat. When a technical with a mounted machine gun tried to join the fight, she removed it from existence. For 20 minutes, she held the entire compound at bay single-handedly, until search and rescue arrived to extract Torres. She used every round of 30mm ammunition she had, fired both her Maverick missiles, and even made strafing runs with her aircraft's .50 caliber defensive systems. When she finally ran out of ammunition, she continued to make low passes over the compound, the sound of her engines alone enough to keep enemy heads down until the rescue helicopter was safely away. Torres survived with 2 broken ribs and a concussion. The high-value target was confirmed killed. The compound was completely neutralized as a threat, and Rodriguez-Chen had flown a textbook close air support mission under impossible conditions, protecting ground forces and rescuing a fellow pilot while taking on an entire enemy position by herself. The gun camera footage from that mission became legendary, not just because of the precision of her shots or the tactical brilliance of her approach, but because of something else: the complete absence of fear or hesitation in her voice during 20 minutes of non-stop combat. When the radio chatter from that mission was transcribed, investigators found that Rodriguez-Chen had maintained perfect radio discipline throughout, called out every target clearly, and never once allowed emotion to creep into her communication. Even while watching a fellow pilot's aircraft come apart in midair and facing enough anti-aircraft fire to down a squadron, she sounded like she was conducting a training exercise. That was when people started using the call sign Valkyrie. In Norse mythology, Valkyries chose which warriors lived and which died in battle, then carried the honored dead to Valhalla. It was meant as a compliment. Rodriguez-Chen had chosen Torres to live, had carried him from certain death to safety on wings of titanium and depleted uranium. She hated the call sign at first. "I'm not choosing who lives and dies," she told her squadron commander. "I'm just trying to keep everyone alive." "Valencia," Lieutenant Colonel Morrison said, studying her performance reports. "In 6 months, you've flown 43 combat missions. You've never failed to provide effective close air support. You've never been late to a target. You've never had to abort a mission due to equipment failure or tactical situation. And most importantly, no American soldier has died when you've been providing cover." She shifted uncomfortably in the chair across from his desk. "Sir, that's just doing my job." "No, Captain, that's being exceptional at your job. The call sign fits." Word of Valkyrie's flying spread beyond her squadron, beyond Bagram, beyond Afghanistan. Fighter pilots stationed in other theaters started requesting transfers to her unit. Ground troops began asking specifically for A-10 support, hoping they'd get the pilot who could thread needles with depleted uranium and fly through hell like it was a Sunday afternoon cruise. But with reputation came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came people who wanted to prove that Valkyrie was just lucky, just hype, just another pilot who'd gotten more credit than she deserved. The test came during Operation Resolute Strike, a major offensive designed to clear Taliban forces from a valley that had been a thorn in coalition forces' side for months. The operation involved multiple ground units, close air support from several different aircraft types, and coordination between American, British, and Afghan forces. Rodriguez Chen was assigned to support Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, elite troops conducting the most dangerous part of the mission, a direct assault on a fortified enemy position in the valley's narrowest choke point. The weather was marginal, with low clouds and intermittent rain. The terrain was challenging, steep hills, narrow valleys, and limited visibility. Most concerning, intelligence suggested the Taliban had learned from previous engagements and positioned significant anti-aircraft weapons throughout the valley. Valkyrie, this is Warrior 6 Actual, came the call from Bravo Company's commander, Major Patterson. We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions, requesting immediate close air support. Rodriguez Chen orbited above the cloud deck, studying the tactical display and listening to the radio chatter from below. She could hear the strain in Patterson's voice, the sound of automatic weapons fire in the background, the clipped communication that meant people were dying. Warrior 6 Valkyrie, I'm above the clouds at your position. Need you to mark targets. Valkyrie, we're taking fire from 3 separate positions, north, northeast, and east of our current position. Danger close on all contacts. We have wounded who can't be moved. Rodriguez Chen dropped below the cloud deck and immediately understood why this mission was going badly. The valley was a perfect kill zone, narrow, with steep sides, limited escape routes, and dozens of concealed fighting positions. The Taliban had turned it into a fortress, and Bravo Company had walked into the trap. Warrior 6, I have visual on your smoke. Confirm you have wounded in position. Affirmative, Valkyrie. 4 wounded, 2 critical. We need immediate suppression of enemy positions to allow medevac. Rodriguez Chen banked left, studying the battlefield below. The enemy positions were expertly concealed, dug into the hillsides with overlapping fields of fire. Taking them out would require precision flying at low altitude, in poor weather, with friendly forces scattered throughout the engagement area. It was exactly the kind of mission that separated good pilots from great ones. Warrior 6 Valkyrie, stay down and mark your friendliest position. I'm coming in from the south. What followed was 15 minutes of flying that would be studied in military academies for decades. Rodriguez Chen brought her A-10 down into the valley like a surgeon wielding a scalpel, systematically destroying enemy positions while avoiding civilian structures, friendly forces, and her own aircraft's safety margins. She flew so low that Taliban fighters could see her face through the cockpit glass. She banked so hard around the valley walls that her wingtips nearly scraped stone. She put 30mm rounds through cave openings barely wider than her aircraft's wingspan, silencing machine gun positions that had been considered unreachable. Holy shit, someone whispered over the radio as Rodriguez Chen pulled up from a gun run that had taken her between 2 hills with less than 20 feet of clearance on either side. That's not flying, that's magic. But the most dangerous threat was still active. A recoilless rifle position high on the valley's eastern wall, perfectly positioned to engage both ground forces and any aircraft that entered the valley. The position was protected by overhead cover and surrounded by steep terrain that made a direct approach nearly impossible. Rodriguez Chen studied the tactical problem, calculating angles and possibilities. The only approach that would allow her to engage the target effectively was a near-vertical dive from directly above, a maneuver that would leave her exposed to ground fire and require her to pull out of the dive with almost no margin for error. Warrior 6 Valkyrie, I can take out the high position, but I need you to suppress everything else for 30 seconds, everything you've got. Valkyrie Warrior 6, that's a negative, too dangerous. We can wait for additional air support. Warrior 6, your wounded don't have time to wait. Give me 30 seconds of suppressive fire and I'll take care of the rest. Rodriguez Chen climbed to 8,000 feet, directly above the enemy position. Below her, Bravo Company opened up with everything they had: M4 rifles, squad automatic weapons, grenade launchers, anything that would keep enemy heads down for half a minute. Then she pointed her aircraft straight down and dove like a stone. The A-10 wasn't designed for vertical dives. It was a close air support aircraft, built for low-altitude, high-survivability missions, not for the kind of precision bombing run Rodriguez-Chen was attempting. But she knew her aircraft's capabilities better than the people who designed it, understood its limits better than the engineers who built it. At 4,000 feet, she was past the point of no return. At 3,000 feet, enemy rounds began sparking off her armored cockpit. At 2,000 feet, she fired both Maverick missiles simultaneously, guiding them into the recoilless rifle position with the kind of precision that should have been impossible at that speed and angle. At 1,000 feet, with the ground rushing up like a judgment, she pulled back on the stick with everything she had. G-forces crushed her into her seat, her vision grayed at the edges, and for a moment that lasted forever, it seemed impossible that the aircraft would recover from the dive. But it did. The A-10 pulled out of its death spiral with feet to spare, climbing away from the valley floor as the explosions from her missiles lit up the eastern wall. The recoilless rifle position and the 20-foot-thick stone wall protecting it simply ceased to exist. Valkyrie Warrior 6, outstanding work. All enemy positions neutralized. Request immediate medevac support. Warrior 6, medevac is inbound your position. Stay safe down there. As she climbed away from the valley, Rodriguez-Chen caught sight of her reflection in the cockpit glass. She looked exactly the same as she had that morning, calm, focused, professional. But something fundamental had changed in the valley below. For the first time since she'd arrived in Afghanistan, the radio chatter after her mission wasn't about luck or precision or technical skill. It was about something else entirely. "Did you see that dive?" one of the Rangers was saying. "Nobody else would have even attempted that shot." "I've been in this man's army for 12 years, came another voice, "and I've never seen anything like that. That wasn't just good flying, that was something else." Major Patterson's voice cut through the chatter. "Whatever you want to call it, Valkyrie just saved 4 of my people. As far as I'm concerned, she can fly like that anytime she wants." Back at Bagram, Rodriguez-Chen landed her battle-damaged A-10 and walked through her post-flight inspection with her crew chief, Sergeant Martinez, no relation to the Martinez from Alpha 7. There were a lot of Martinezes in the military. The aircraft had taken 14 hits from small arms fire and 1 near miss from an RPG, but its titanium bathtub had protected both pilot and vital systems. "Ma'am," Martinez said, running his hands over the newest collection of bullet holes, "this bird's starting to look like Swiss cheese. How many hits does that make this month?" Rodriguez-Chen consulted her logbook, where she meticulously recorded every aspect of every mission. 47 confirmed impacts, 12 near misses from RPGs or mortars, and 2 SAM launches that missed. Martinez whistled low. "Ma'am, you might want to consider flying higher." "Can't do that, Sergeant. Ground troops need close air support, not high-altitude support." "Yes, ma'am. Just saying the aircraft can only take so much punishment." Rodriguez-Chen looked at her A-10, scarred and patched but still airworthy, still ready for the next mission. It was a tough aircraft, designed to absorb damage and keep flying. But Martinez was right. There were limits to what any machine could endure. "Sergeant, how long to get her ready for the next mission?" Martinez checked his watch. "She'll be fueled, armed, and ready in 2 hours, ma'am, just like always." "Thank you, Sergeant. I'll see you in 2 hours." As Rodriguez-Chen walked across the flight line toward the debriefing rooms, she noticed something different. Other pilots, crew chiefs, and support personnel were watching her with expressions she'd never seen before. Not skepticism or curiosity, but something approaching awe. Word of the Valley mission had spread through the base in the time it took her to land and inspect her aircraft. By the time she reached the operations building, her squadron commander was waiting for her with a smile and a message. Valencia, I just got off the phone with General Morrison at Kabul. He wanted me to pass along his personal congratulations for your performance today. He also wanted to know if you'd be interested in a transfer to the 355th Fighter Squadron at Davis-Monthan. Rodriguez Chen paused. The 355th was an elite unit, flying the newest A-10C variants with the most advanced targeting systems. It was the kind of assignment that could define a career. Sir, with respect, I'd prefer to stay here. My unit needs me. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison studied her for a long moment. Valencia, you do realize that what you're doing here is unprecedented. Your mission success rate, your innovation under fire, your ability to operate in conditions that would ground other pilots, you're redefining what close air support can accomplish. Sir, I'm just doing my job. No, Captain. You're doing everyone else's job better than they thought it could be done. That evening, Rodriguez Chen sat in her quarters, writing her daily letter home. She'd been corresponding with her parents every day since deployment, sharing what she could about her experiences while staying within operational security guidelines. Today was challenging, she wrote, but rewarding. I was able to help some soldiers who needed assistance, and everyone made it home safely. The weather was poor and the tactical situation was complex, but the A-10 performed beautifully. I'm grateful for all the training and preparation that made it possible to do my job effectively. She didn't mention the vertical dive, the bullet holes, or the fact that she'd just flown a mission that would be studied and discussed for years to come. She didn't mention that people were starting to use words like legendary when they talked about her flying. She certainly didn't mention that she'd probably just ended her career as an anonymous pilot and begun something else entirely. Some things were too big to fit in a letter home. The transformation was subtle at first. Rodriguez Chen noticed it in small things, conversations that stopped when she entered the mess hall, crew chiefs who went out of their way to ensure her aircraft was perfect, ground troops who specifically requested A-10 support for their missions. Then came the media attention. A combat correspondent had been embedded with Bravo Company during the Valley operation. His report, filed 3 days after the mission, described Rodriguez Chen's flying in terms that made her deeply uncomfortable. Like watching a master artist work with a brush made of depleted uranium and a canvas painted in enemy fire. The story was picked up by military publications, then mainstream media. Within 2 weeks, Rodriguez Chen found herself fielding interview requests from newspapers, magazines, and television networks, all wanting to know about the Angel of Kandahar, the Desert Valkyrie, the pilot who was redefining close air support in the War on Terror. She declined every interview request. "Ma'am," her public affairs officer said, "this is good publicity for the Air Force, for the A-10 program, for women in combat roles. You could help a lot of people by sharing your story." "Captain Williams, my story is classified operational information. The only people who need to know about it are the soldiers whose lives depend on it." But she couldn't control the stories that other people told. Soldiers from Alpha 7, Bravo Company, and dozens of other units began sharing their own accounts of missions where Valkyrie had appeared like something out of mythology, turning hopeless situations into victories. The stories grew in the telling, as war stories always do. Some claimed she could fly through weather that grounded every other pilot. Others insisted she could put rounds through targets that shouldn't have been possible to hit. All agreed that when Valkyrie was overhead, American soldiers came home alive. The Taliban noticed too. Intelligence reports began mentioning a specific American pilot, a small woman who flew an A-10 with unusual markings, who appeared in battles where the odds were hopeless and somehow made victory possible. They called her Malik Almont, the angel of death. Bounties were placed on her head. Special anti-aircraft units were deployed specifically to hunt her. Taliban commanders began modifying their tactics, assuming that any engagement with American forces might bring Valkyrie swooping down like divine retribution. Rodriguez Chen learned about the bounty during an intelligence briefing 6 months into her deployment. $50,000 American dollars for proof of her death, offered by a Taliban commander whose convoy she destroyed the previous month. "Ma'am," the intelligence officer said, "we recommend modifying your flight patterns, varying your approach routes, and coordinating with additional escort aircraft for your missions." Rodriguez Chen studied the intelligence report, noting the tactical analysis of her previous missions, the detailed description of her aircraft's markings, and the surprisingly accurate assessment of her capabilities. "Captain, how many American soldiers are alive today? Because I don't vary my approach routes or coordinate with escort aircraft." The intelligence officer consulted his files. "Ma'am, based on after-action reports, we estimate approximately 230 confirmed saves, with possible additional casualties prevented through deterrent effect. Then I'll continue flying the same way I've been flying. The Taliban can put whatever price they want on my head, but they still have to catch me first." What the intelligence reports didn't capture was the psychological impact Rodriguez Chen was having on both sides of the conflict. American forces,